It was a Tuesday night when Clara stood in the living room, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the carpet. I could see it in her posture, the tension, the hesitation. Her body language screamed she was rehearsing the words in her head, trying to find the right moment to let them out. And I knew what was coming. I'd felt it for days, maybe weeks. The air between us had been heavy, like a storm waiting to break. I wasn't surprised when she finally spoke. "John, I think I need a break to figure out what I really want," she said, her voice soft but deliberate. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just leaned back on the couch, studying her face. She looked calm, almost too calm, as though she were asking for directions instead of dropping a bombshell. I already knew. This wasn't about space or time. This was about someone else. There was always someone else. I took a deep breath, then responded, "All right. Take all the time you need." She blinked, clearly not expecting me to agree so quickly. "Wait, you're okay with that?" "Sure," I said, "but let's make it clear what a break means. If we're not together, we don't live together. You'll need to pack your things." Her mouth opened slightly, as if she was about to protest, but I didn't give her the chance. I stood up slowly, my voice steady. "This apartment is under my name. You need time to figure things out? Fine. Do that somewhere else." She looked at me, her eyes filled with confusion, disappointment, and maybe a little betrayal. I could see her processing everything I just said, her mind racing to find a way to turn it all back, to change my mind. But I had made up mine. It was over. This wasn't a breakup I'd been waiting for, but it was a breakup nonetheless. "You're being unreasonable," she said finally, her voice shaking, but her posture still stiff with pride. I didn't argue. "You're leaving by choice. I'm just respecting your decision." She looked at me one last time, her face a mixture of sadness and frustration. "So, that's it? 3 years and you're just done?" I nodded once, slowly, as if the weight of 3 years together meant nothing anymore. "You wanted a break. I'm giving you one." She tried to smile, but it was weak, and her eyes were wet. I could tell she was trying not to break down right there, in front of me. "I thought you'd fight for me," she whispered. I shrugged, emotionless. You can't fight for someone who's already somewhere else. The silence that followed felt suffocating. She didn't say anything else. Just stood there, staring at me, like she didn't recognize the person in front of her. I didn't recognize her anymore either. I told her I'd be changing the locks the next evening and that she should collect her things before then. She didn't argue. She just looked at me like she was seeing a stranger, someone she'd never truly known. That night, I slept in the bedroom, the door locked. I didn't need to hear her sobbing or begging me to reconsider. I didn't need to see her regret. I just needed to move on. The next morning, when I woke up, she was already gone. There was nothing left in the living room but the echoes of our past, memories that now seemed so distant. I found her key on the counter, along with a note that simply said, "You'll regret this." But I didn't regret it. I hadn't regretted a single decision I made that night. It was time to let go. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just done.
The following days passed in a blur of routine and empty space. I focused on work, buried myself in emails and deadlines. It was easy to get lost in the chaos of a construction project in downtown Denver, far away from the tangled mess that was Clara and me. The distance gave me clarity. But every now and then, my phone would buzz, and I'd see her name flashing on the screen. I didn't answer. Her social media updates flooded my feed, one after another, selfies with sad captions, motivational quotes about finding oneself, and vague posts about healing. It was like she was trying to rewrite the narrative, make herself the victim of a story that wasn't hers to tell anymore. I didn't bite. I didn't reply. I just scrolled past, indifferent. I had nothing to prove to anyone, especially not to her. It wasn't until a week later that I heard from Madison, her younger sister, with a message that brought everything rushing back. "Hey, just so you know," the message began. "Clara's staying with Henry. She said it's temporary." I stared at the text for a long time, the words slowly sinking in. Henry? Of course. Why was I surprised? She had someone waiting in the wings all along. I typed a response quickly, my fingers moving without thought. Thanks for telling me. Don't get involved in this. Madison didn't let it go that easily. She texted back almost immediately, too late. I didn't respond. What was there to say? I'd known deep down that she was never going to be alone. I had been the fool who held on too long, waiting for something that wasn't there anymore. For the next 2 weeks, I kept to myself. No calls from Clara, no texts. The silence was deafening, but it was also a relief. I worked. I slept. And when I wasn't working, I was moving through the days like they were an endless stream of monotony. Everything felt like it was finally back in order, except for one thing. I hadn't let go of her, not entirely. Then came the call. Gary, my boss, asked me to come into his office one Thursday morning. As usual, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. We've got a mess in Barcelona, he said, his face grim. The structural retrofit's behind schedule. The client's furious, and the project manager just quit. I need someone who won't fall apart under pressure. That's you. 3 months, maybe 4. You up for it? Without thinking, I replied, yes. I'm in. I needed a reset. Something far from the mess Clara had left behind. I needed to drown out the noise of the past. That night, when I called Madison to let her know, her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Funny timing, she said. I just got accepted into a short art program in Barcelona. 3 months, too. Small world, I replied, trying to sound casual, though inside, my mind was racing. Madison paused before adding, You sure you're okay with all this? With Clara. I took a deep breath. I'm better than okay. I'm rebuilding. A few days later, I boarded a plane to Barcelona. The flight was long, and I barely slept, but when I touched down, something shifted inside me. I wasn't running away from my problems anymore. I was running toward something new, something that didn't involve her. The apartment my company rented for me was nothing fancy. It was practical, a 2-bedroom near the project site. Just enough space for me to be alone with my thoughts. Madison arrived a few days later, looking relieved. Are you sure it's okay if I stay here? She asked, glancing around at the apartment. Of course, I said, gesturing to the empty room. It's a big place. I'll be at the site most days anyway. She smiled cautiously, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally making a decision for myself, something that wasn't clouded by guilt or resentment. Barcelona was different. The rhythm of the city, the hustle of the work, it didn't care about my past. It didn't care about Clara. It was just me, and the job, and the quiet hum of progress. Every day I woke up, went to the site, checked blueprints, approved designs. When a problem arose, I solved it. When a number didn't add up, I recalculated. There was no room for emotion, no space for regret. And then there was Madison, who was settling into her art program, meeting new people, doing what she loved. We barely crossed paths except for dinner, but even those moments felt like a small but steady joy. One evening, as we sat on the balcony eating takeout, she looked out at the skyline and broke the silence. You know she's still talking about you online, right? Madison asked, her voice careful, but there was something in her tone that told me she wasn't entirely comfortable with the situation. I figured, I replied, sipping my drink. She's saying you had anger issues, that you kicked her out without warning. I nodded slowly. Let her. Truth doesn't need a spotlight. Madison studied me for a moment. You're not even curious what she's doing now? I sighed. I already know. She's still trying to control the story. Madison laughed softly, but there was something sad in it. You sound like you've made peace with it. I have, I said, feeling the weight of those words for the first time. She lost the only person who never needed to be managed. The next few weeks passed without incident. The project was back on track, and so was I. I didn't need her. I didn't need the drama, the games, or the lies. I had my work, my life, and most importantly, my peace. But I knew deep down, Clara was still out there somewhere. She hadn't given up on trying to control the narrative. And maybe she never would. But I didn't care. I was rebuilding. And nothing was going to stop me now. A month passed, and life in Barcelona settled into a rhythm. I was getting into the groove of things at the construction site. Meetings, site checks, designs. It all felt so clear, so structured. The pressure of deadlines had replaced the emotional chaos I'd left behind. I was finally starting to feel like myself again. But even though the work kept me busy, there were moments when my mind would drift back to her. Clara. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was always looking over my shoulder, waiting for her to make a move, waiting for her to somehow worm her way back into my life. Then came the news. One night, while I was flipping through my phone, I saw an alert for a new message. It was from Madison. She had texted me earlier that day, but I hadn't checked it until now. Lillian's back in town. She's been trying to get in touch with you again. Says she wants closure. I froze. Lillian. My ex. The one who had been the catalyst for everything. The one who made me doubt my decisions. I couldn't believe she was still involved in this mess. I hadn't heard from her in months, and now, just when I thought everything was finally falling into place, she reappeared. I didn't respond right away. I had learned my lesson about reacting impulsively, about letting my emotions dictate my actions. But the fact that she was trying to reach me again stirred something inside me. I had to be sure. I had to know what she wanted. The next day, after work, I made my way to the apartment, leaving the chaos of the site behind for a few hours. When I walked in, Madison was sitting on the couch, her expression unreadable. "Did you hear about Lillian?" she asked, her voice cautious. I nodded, dropping my bag onto the chair. I did. "What's going on?" "She's been texting me," Madison continued, "about you. She says you owe her an explanation, that you're the one who broke everything." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. Of course, it was my fault. I'd always been the one who was supposed to keep it together, keep her happy. Even now, she couldn't accept that I had moved on. "Don't let her in again," Madison said softly, her eyes searching mine for any hint that I might be considering it. "She's still the same person. She'll never change." "I know," I said, my voice firm, but the sting of doubt still lingered in the back of my mind. The old wounds weren't fully healed, not yet. But I have to hear her out. I need to be sure she's not going to keep playing this game. Madison didn't argue. She just nodded, understanding the weight of what I was about to do. The next day, I met Lillian. She had asked to meet at a small cafe by the beach. It was a neutral ground, far from the apartment, far from the drama. When I saw her, it was hard to recognize the person sitting across from me. She looked different, thinner, worn out. Her eyes no longer had that fiery spark they once did. It was as if the person I had known had been replaced by someone who was slowly losing herself. "I didn't expect to see you here," I said, my voice steady, but I could feel the tension creeping up inside me. "I know," she replied, her voice softer than I remembered. "But I had to talk to you. I've been trying to move on, but I can't." I didn't say anything at first. I just let her talk, letting her words fill the silence between us. "I know you think I left you for someone else," she continued, her voice trembling. "But it wasn't like that. I wasn't happy with the way we were. I needed something more." I listened, but I didn't feel the anger I thought I would. I didn't feel the heartbreak that had once consumed me. I just felt tired. I'd heard it all before, and it didn't matter anymore. "I'm not here to blame you, John," she added, her eyes welling up with tears. "I just wanted you to know that I've changed. I've learned from my mistakes." I leaned forward, looking at her carefully. "Lillian, it's been months. We're not the same people we were when we were together. I've moved on, and I don't think I can go back to what we had." Her face fell, and I could see the frustration building behind her eyes. But instead of getting angry, she just nodded, defeated. "I guess I had to hear that from you," she said quietly. "I didn't expect you to forgive me. I wanted closure. For both of us." The conversation drifted into silence after that. There was nothing more to say. I didn't need her closure anymore. I had found my peace, and it didn't involve her. When I left the cafe, I felt lighter than I had in months. Maybe it was the weight of that conversation, or maybe it was just that I finally realized I wasn't the person who had lost everything. She was. I had kept moving forward, while she had stayed stuck in her own web of lies and self-delusion. That night, I called Madison and told her what had happened. She didn't seem surprised, but she was glad I had made it through. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. I wasn't running from my past anymore. I was building my future. The days in Barcelona began to blur into each other, and slowly, I realized I had stopped thinking about Clara, about the life I'd left behind in Chicago. Work at the construction site continued to keep me busy, and my routine was predictable and comforting. There were no more unexpected messages, no more emotional landmines to step on. For the first time in a long time, I was truly at peace with myself. It wasn't just the work that kept me grounded. It was also Madison, who had become a constant presence in my life. We still kept our distance at times, but over the weeks, something had shifted. We would have dinner together, talk about everything and nothing at all. Her art program was wrapping up, and she seemed more confident, more alive. She had her own dreams, and I had mine. But somewhere along the way, we had started to share a future. One night, after a long day on the site, I came home to find her sitting on the balcony, her sketchbook in her lap. She was focused, her eyes tracing the lines of her work in the fading light. I took a deep breath and walked toward her, unsure of what was going on in her mind. "How was your day?" she asked, glancing up with a smile that was more relaxed than I had seen in a while. "Busy," I replied, settling into the chair next to her. "How about you?" She shrugged slightly, the edges of her smile fading just a little. "I finished my last project. The final showcase is coming up in a couple of days." "That's great," I said, trying to keep the conversation light. But I could tell something was on her mind. She looked at me, her gaze steady and searching. "I've been thinking, John," she began, her voice quieter than usual. "About everything. About us." I felt a tightness in my chest. I had been expecting this moment. I had felt it building over the past few weeks, a shift in the air between us. But I wasn't ready for it. I didn't want to make any mistakes, not this time. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully, trying to keep my voice even. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "I don't want us to be just a rebound. I don't want you to feel like I'm just here because of what happened with Lillian. I want us to be something real, something that stands on its own." I was quiet for a moment, weighing her words. My heart had started to beat a little faster, and the thought of what we could become made me both excited and anxious. "You're not a rebound," I finally said, my voice firm. "And I don't want you to feel like you're here for the wrong reasons. I'm here because I want to be with you." Her eyes softened, and I saw the relief flood her expression. "Then let's take this slow," she said, her smile returning. "Let's not rush anything. Let's see where this goes." And that was it. The tension that had been building between us vanished, replaced with something simpler, something honest. We didn't need labels or timelines. We just needed to be present in the moment. The next few days were full of quiet contentment. Madison's art show was a success, and she invited me to it, though I wasn't sure if I was ready to dive into the art world with her. But when I saw her stand there in front of her work, the pride in her eyes, I knew I had made the right choice in supporting her. We were building something new, something healthy, something that didn't carry the weight of old mistakes. Then, a week later, I received a call from Gary. He asked if I'd be willing to take on a lead role in an upcoming project back home in Chicago. The timing was perfect, everything was falling into place. The project was a big one, and the idea of going back to my roots, to the place that had once been home, made my heart race. "I think it's time to go home," I said to Madison later that evening as we sat together on the couch. She had known about the call, but this time, I could see the excitement in her eyes too. "I think you're right," she said softly. "But you know, it feels like we've built something here. It won't be easy to leave." I took her hand in mine, my fingers brushing against hers. "We're not leaving anything behind, Madison. We're just taking the next step. Together." And so, after months of avoiding the past and burying old wounds, I found myself ready to move forward. The work in Chicago, the life with Madison, it all felt like a new beginning. I had found peace in Barcelona, and now it was time to take that peace with me. I wasn't the same person who had left Chicago months ago. I had grown, I had healed, and I was no longer looking over my shoulder. The past had no hold on me anymore. As I stood at the airport, waiting for the flight home, I realized that everything had led me here. I had learned the hard way, but I was stronger for it. And for the first time in years, I was excited to see what the future held. The flight back to Chicago was long, but I didn't mind. It gave me plenty of time to reflect on the journey that had brought me here. The turbulence, the heartache, the new beginnings, they all seemed so distant now. My thoughts drifted between the past and the future, but I wasn't anxious anymore. For the first time in a long while, I was eager for what lay ahead. When I landed, the familiar skyline of Chicago greeted me, and I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. This city had been my home, my life, my everything. But it was also where my relationship with Clara had fallen apart. It was where the worst moments of my life had happened. Yet now, it felt like a blank canvas. No longer weighed down by memories, I was ready to build something new. Madison had decided to join me. It wasn't a decision we made lightly, but she understood that this was part of my journey. I was glad she was with me. After all, she had been a constant in the chaos of the past few months, and I couldn't imagine facing this next chapter alone. The project I was assigned to was massive, and my team was counting on me. I was excited but also nervous. Stepping into a leadership role after everything that had happened felt like a huge responsibility. But I had learned that pressure wasn't something to fear. It was something to channel, to drive myself forward. I threw myself into the project, and soon, the days were filled with meetings, site visits, and constant problem solving. I found a rhythm again, the same rhythm I had when I first started in construction. But this time, I was more focused, more driven, and most importantly more at peace. I didn't let the little things rattle me. I didn't let the weight of old mistakes cloud my judgment. One evening, after a long day at the site, I came home to find Madison sitting in the living room, sketching in her notebook. She had settled into her new routine, and though she missed her art program in Barcelona, she had found a new space to create and explore. "I talked to Sabrina today," she said, looking up from her sketchbook as I walked in. "She said Lillian's been trying to contact you again." I sighed, rubbing my hand over my face. It had been months since I last heard from Clara. I had hoped she would finally move on, but it seemed like that was asking too much. "Has she?" I asked, trying to hide the irritation in my voice. I didn't want to care anymore, but it still stung, knowing she couldn't let go of the past. "Yeah, she sent a message to Sabrina about you," Madison said quietly. "She told her you were the one that got away, and she regrets everything. She even said she wants to talk to you, to explain things." I leaned against the wall, my arms crossed. I felt an odd mixture of indifference and frustration. "I'm done with explanations," I muttered, shaking my head. "I've heard it all before. I don't need her to tell me why she left. I don't need her to apologize. I've moved on, Madison. I'm not going back." Madison nodded, her expression softening. "I know, John. I can tell. You're not the same person anymore." And that was the truth. I wasn't the same. I had become someone who didn't rely on anyone to define his worth. I had become someone who could move forward, no matter how difficult the past had been. The weight of Clara's departure didn't crush me anymore. In fact, I had learned to carry it, to let it be part of who I was, but not all of me. A few days later, I ran into someone from my past, Sabrina. It was purely coincidental. She had been in town for a work event and had texted me to meet up. I hadn't seen her in months, and it was strange how everything had shifted between us. There were no hard feelings, no anger. Just two people who had shared a chapter of their lives, but had moved in different directions. We met at a cafe downtown, and when I saw her, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. She was no longer the person who had tried to protect me from Clara. She had her own life now, her own path. "I heard you've been busy," she said with a smirk as we sat down. "Running projects, getting promotions. You've come a long way, John." I laughed, shaking my head. "Yeah, well, it wasn't always this easy." Sabrina nodded. "I know. But you're doing it. And that's what matters." We talked for hours, about the past, about what had happened between us, about Clara, and about the future. It was strange, but liberating. I no longer felt like I needed answers, or closure. I had everything I needed right here in front of me. As we parted ways, Sabrina smiled at me. "I'm glad you're happy, John. You deserve it." I smiled back, but it was different this time. I wasn't clinging to the past anymore. I was finally free. Free to live, free to love, free to be myself. That night, As I sat on the balcony with Madison, watching the city lights flicker below, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. We were both still figuring things out, still learning about each other, but it felt right. I think we've both come a long way, I said, turning to Madison with a smile. She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. We have. And we're still moving forward. And we were. Together.